Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post published a paper, an article rather, on last Thursday called "Stop Sending Around This Photo of Bernie Sanders." And this is not the photo that we've been telling everyone to stop sending around. Right, there's a photo of Martin Luther King marching in Selma, and there's this white tall guy with glasses who's just to the right of King and maybe 10 rows back, and people are circulating that, saying that that's Bernie Sanders, and the Bernie Sanders camp has already said this is not us. And so we have advocated the same. We've said, listen, stop sending that picture around. That is not Bernie Sanders. Jonathan Capehart has said that the picture of this tall young man with glasses at the University of Chicago staging a sit-in against segregated housing, that is not Bernie Sanders. How can I say? So anyway, let me just unpack it before I let loose on Capehart. So this is a little a segment of what he wrote. He said, but that's not Bernie Sanders in the photo. That's Bruce Rappaport. Classmates of the two men started raising concerns about the discrepancy last year. According to Time, four of University of Chicago alumni told the magazine in November that they believed the man to be Rappaport, also a student activist who died in 2006. At the time of the story, the photo was still captioned as Bernie Sanders in the University of Chicago's photo drive, but the picture's caption has since changed. Now, here's the problem. Jonathan Capehart took this recollection from two of Bernie Sanders' classmates and ran with this assertion that the guy in the picture is not Bernie Sanders. He didn't just go with a discrepancy in archives. He didn't just go with the fact that his name was listed in the archives, and he didn't go with the fact that, you know, that this could be some type of error in terms of the professional archivers who actually did this, right? He went from a moral high ground perspective. And this is what he wrote. He said, for a candidate who garnered 92% of New Hampshire Democratic voters, who said the most important trait for a candidate was that he or she be honest, the least his campaign could do is remove that photo from its Tumblr feed and stop physically placing him where he existed only in spirit. So it's not just that he's saying that this was, side note, this whole thing has been debunked, but I'm just gonna show you the problem with his logic in the first place, and then we'll go with the debunking. So it's not just him saying that this is some type of archival error, which, if this was not Bernie Sanders, it would have been an archival error on the part of the University of Chicago. Notwithstanding the fact that I'm sure Bernie Sanders can recognize himself from college, right? Let's just put that there, right? But if there was an error, it would have been on the side of the University of Chicago. But instead of walking this as a journalist, he decides to spin this as a hit piece on Sanders's character, which has been this has been the motive. This has been the entire idea. The way that they have attacked Sanders has always been about maligning his character and his integrity. And so where Capehart could have had this entire conversation legitimately about the questions of students believing that this is someone else, contrary to what the archive said, he decides to make this a moral judgment against Bernie Sanders. Well, the entire thing blew up in his face. The entire thing blew up in his face because the guy who took the picture came back and said, no, this is Bernie Sanders. This is Bernie Sanders. I took pictures of him before. I took pictures of him afterwards. This is Bernie Sanders. And so now I'm talking about Jonathan Capehart, instead of retracting the original story, he added simply a he said, she said conversation, that this is confusing because they said this, the school said that, and all this other foolishness. But to add to this, anyone online who has questioned Jonathan Capehart about this, he's blocked him on Twitter. The reason I have to take time with Jonathan Capehart here is because there are people with platforms of influence that are using those platforms of influence, and they're guising their bias against Bernie Sanders, and they're guising it and wrapping it up in journalism, in the guise of journalism. They are using their platforms to attack the character of Bernie Sanders, and they're trying to wrap it in this bow of being unbiased and just reporting, right? It's as ridiculous as Bill O'Reilly saying this is the no spin zone, when in actuality, there's so much spin there that we have vertigo. That's exactly what people like Jonathan Capehart have done against Bernie Sanders. Now, the problem I have with this is even deeper than just the yellow journalism, right? The fact that he's trying to destroy Bernie Sanders. The problem I have with it is because people like Capehart are just too cowardly to come out and say, I like Hillary Clinton and I want Hillary Clinton to win. Instead, what they do is, I'm not biased, but Bernie Sanders is such a bad character. He obviously did not really do anything meaningful in the civil rights movement. He obviously is not consistent. He obviously has moral failings. And so what they do is, because they're too cowardly to endorse Hillary Clinton and to fall on the side of Hillary Clinton, they instead attack Bernie Sanders. I've been saying this for the longest, and you have a lot of Black journalists who are doing this, and they're using their position of influence and political power to try to usher the Black vote into the hands of Hillary Clinton, not by endorsing Hillary Clinton, but by trying to destroy the character and the consistency and the history of Bernie Sanders. And it's not just Jonathan Capehart. It's not just Jonathan Capehart. I'm not quite ready to call the names of actually, I called them last week. Joy Reid. She's doing the same damn thing. What's the Goldie Taylor? She's doing the same thing. It's the folks over there, This Week in Blackness. Not all of them, but 1/3 of them they're doing the same thing, where they're not openly endorsing Hillary Clinton. Instead, they're just attacking Bernie Sanders. And the problem I have with this the most is that they are doing a disservice to the Black community. They're doing a disservice to America as a whole, right? But because of the influence that they have over the Black community, it's a greater disservice right to the Black community, because it's preventing us from having very necessary conversations about income inequality. It's preventing us from having conversations about the economic root of racism. It's not allowing us to move into a place where we actually can address some of the most prevalent problems in the Black community, all because they want to pretend as though they're not biased, and they just attack Bernie Sanders, when if they would just go and support Hillary Clinton, be transparent about their support of Hillary Clinton, like I am transparent about my support of Bernie Sanders, then we could just have a competition of ideas. But instead, they engage in yellow journalism. They engage in the guise of being unbiased when they are everything but unbiased. And they're like sheep to the slaughter, ushering their followers into the hands of Hillary Clinton, to the detriment of the Black community and America as a whole. So this hit piece from Jonathan Capehart is just a continuation in the same MO. He wrote a piece maybe 3 weeks ago about how much Black people love Hillary Clinton, how much Black people are just in love with Bill Clinton. And we just love him so much, and we don't really care about what Bernie Sanders. You see what kind of foolishness, right? We don't, instead of exposing or having a meaningful conversation about what Hillary Clinton was doing in the 60s versus what Bernie Sanders was doing in the 60s, you have Black journalists out there just so enamored with power, so enamored with the political establishment as it is, because they have been successful in the political establishment as it is, that they are sacrificing the greater good for their own community in exchange for supporting the status quo. That's what we're up against. So that's why, and I tell you, I talked about this on the Majority Report today with Michael Brooks. That is why, as a person that is in media, I'm a commentator, I'm not a journalist, but that's why I'm still very transparent. You go to my Twitter page and you see Feel the Burn. I'm very transparent because there needs to be conversations about the economic disparity that is affecting middle-class Americans across the nation, but it's exacerbated in Black communities. And the fact that you have these so-called journalists doing the bidding, like, I can handle it if you just say, listen, I like Hillary Clinton. This is why I like Hillary Clinton. This is why I think she's better. This is why I think she's better than Bernie Sanders. But they don't have the wherewithal to do that, so they just attack Bernie Sanders. Not only are they poor journalists, but they're cowards. Call it your live.